Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Talk Show. Today, we're going to be answering the question, why are Catholic parishes failing?
Yeah, we're going to look at why parishes are failing and closing and look at the reasons like demographics, changing models of worship, and so much more.
And if the doors of the church are indeed closing, how can we open wide those doors and open them wide to Christ?
All right, good to be back with you guys. Today, we're joined with Father Josh McCarty from the Diocese of Owensboro, and I'm really excited. This, I think, is a topic that a lot of people think about, especially over the last few years, and I'm really excited to get this going.
And I am pumped because he is an alumnus brother of mine from Ave Maria College. It's finally great to be together on this show. This has been a long time coming, and I can't wait to jump into this content.
So we got a couple gyrenes today talking about why people are jumping ship, how appropriate.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
Now,
you just made Mr. Monahan very happy right there.
Yeah, shout out Ave Maria, much love. So we've all been driving around and seeing a closed Catholic church. We've all read stories about the bishop has to close this amount of parishes. These parishes are merging. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. And there's very few things that are sadder to me than seeing a building where people were baptized, married, commended on their death, and have their funeral, lived and breathed, and then seeing it deconsecrated, and that parish now is gone to history. That's a terribly sad thing. I mean, it's almost, there's very few things that are physical structures than an empty church that are more indicative of the decline of our society, our culture, but also of families that are forgotten and the poor forgotten souls in purgatory and all these things. And a lot of that's tied up in a closed parish. But we wanted to explore, why are parishes closing? What are some of the things that's causing it? And what can be done to reverse it? So that's why we have Father Josh on. And Father Josh, he's a pastor as well. Father Rich is a pastor. And getting their perspective as these, as the shepherds of a parish, what works, what doesn't work, and how can we reverse this trend? So, Father Josh, we really appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks for having me. Well, I feel a little bit out of place to be among you guys, sports aficionados and the like. I'm a hardcore nerd myself. And so thank you for welcoming me into your company here. And if I seem awkward at some point, you'll understand why. And so, you might have to bail me out if I get stuck on a word or something. Actually, 12 years of practice, I've got a little bit better about getting.
That's all right. None of us can pronounce a word to save our lives. I mean,
yeah, we're gonna lean into you for that proper pronunciation. And Father Josh, I mean, I don't know about you, brother, but for me, I've had to minister to a number of people from the Northeast, from the Midwest, where their parish is closed. And I don't think there's anything more wounding spiritually to someone that has such intimate ties to a parish community. And then when they see those doors close, when they see those parishes fail, it is so wounding. Have you had that pastoral experience?
Well, it's kind of interesting. In my neck of the woods in Western Kentucky, we're a little bit insulated from some of the larger city coastal sorts of closings. We've had a few parishes to close, and we'll talk about later some of the other societal implications. But it's like, are we losing people? Definitely. Are the trends moving towards closing? Yes, and we've had to do some rearranging on minor levels, but our area is made up a lot of farmers, people that work the land, people that are seemingly practical and resilient and not especially neurotic. And it's really kind of a wonderful place. We have comparative to the statistics within the United States, I mean, we have a high level of church attendance. In fact, at one point, the Diocese of Owensboro was rated as one of the highest attending dioceses in the country. So, long answer to your question, which is that we see it coming like a tidal wave, but it hasn't hit here just yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, Shio, I mean, we've got 5 leading ones. You know, jumping right into the content. What would number 1 be, do you think?
So I think what Father Josh touched on is a good way to jump into the first one, and that's demographics. And he said how in his more rural and agrarian area, it's not quite the same as maybe inner cities, coastal cities, where the demographics have changed and shifted so much. I remember one time the Diocese of Cleveland closed, I don't know, about 10 years ago, about 13, 14, 15 churches, somewhere around there. It was big news, right? Mm-hmm. And one day I decided to get in my car and I drove past every one of those parishes that was closing because I wanted to see personally why this was happening. Went out and got a cup of coffee, drove around for like 3 hours. The majority of these churches were in former ethnic areas. They were typically built 100 years ago. So when you had the big immigration boom at the turn of the century, you'd have your Italian parish, your Hungarian parish, your Irish parish, and they're all concentrated in the inner city. And there'd be a parish literally across the street from another Catholic parish. But over here, they speak Hungarian. Over here, it's Polish. With the melting pot that America is and the homogenization, for better or worse, that our society has went through, you don't see those kind of ethnic, national-oriented parishes anymore. A lot of those are the ones that have closed. Then also, and that's because so many people in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and continuing to this day, moved out of areas and moved to the suburbs. And a lot of those churches were no longer really serving the people who they were built for. And you had other populations move in who didn't have the same demographic makeup of being Catholic, and those parishes invariably failed.
Yeah, and they didn't have to choose between 2 churches across the street from each other. There was it's almost like a practical degradation, if you will, in some sense.
Yeah, a lot of the parishes that have closed are either no longer needed because of changing demographic reality of where people live, but also are kind of, in a sense, the result of an overbuilt, right? Everyone had to have their own church. Every ethnicity had to have their own church. Now, the other thing it really is parents are having less kids. When you used to have 5 or 6 or 7 kids, now you have maybe 1, maybe 2, or none, no kids at all. So those parishes, they don't need to support the same amount of people anymore. So you have smaller families living further and further apart. Where they're living in the suburbs, they're not close to each other. They're not a community anymore. It loses a lot of the sense of why parishes were built and why parishes have been the way they were for hundreds of years. So the shifting demographics causing a massive impact. And a lot of the times you can understand why a church should be closed and why a bishop is making a good choice when they're taking valuable resources from something that really has become obsolete and moving it to a place where it's better needed. So I don't know. That's my experience of the demographic impact of parishes closing. What are your guys' thoughts?
I think it's a phenomenal way to kind of really see where Father Josh is in respect to Western Kentucky. You're in a massive city in Cleveland, a historic city. You've got Delacrosse with an experience of the Catholic Church in Texas on a ground level. And then me in Jacksonville, which is a large city, largest area-wide city, and we are building churches. I'm currently in the process of building a church and trying to figure out demographics, what is the trajectory of our growth, and trying to build a church accordingly. In fact, just prior to this meeting, I had a meeting with an architectural group out of Orlando to discuss exactly that. So, there are churches that are closing. I think it's a demographic issue without a doubt. And I could see that even Delacrosse grew up in Jacksonville in the Arlington area. And Arlington is experiencing that decline in attendance at Mass, specifically at Christ the King, which was one of the largest, most engaging parishes, historically speaking, and held up on a national level for a stewardship model of a church. But there's a structure within canon law that we cannot forget. And that is the reality of the pastor and the parish has a responsibility to the geographical boundaries of that parish. And it includes, yes, the registered parishioners. You engage your registered parishioners, but the parish, the pastor has responsibility over every soul that is within the parish boundaries. And when the engagement of a particular demographic of those who are registered is the exclusive interest of pastoral activity, and the other demographic is not engaged, that is present in a local community, when that demographic moves away, I think that's exactly what we're seeing when there is just such poor attendance in these churches that are undergoing that transition.
Father Josh, what are your comments on that? How have you, how do you kind of view that in your situation?
One of the things that's so interesting to me is this concept of being registered in a parish. I'm not sure when its origins were from, but it's really a curious sort of way of thinking about the parish life and activity and aim, really. And so, Father Rich, when you mentioned registration, it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, so what is registration? Well, it's you printed off some forms and you gave it to somebody, or maybe you're fancy and so you did it online or with a web form or something. And you're like, somebody fills it out and they give it back and it's like, boom, they're registered. And so it's like, all right, so we set this kind of threshold for, and it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, canonically, it doesn't mean anything. But is there value to being registered? It's like, well, you can keep track on some level. You can send out a mailing to them. You can
send out donation envelopes.
Yeah, please give us lots of money because we're building a new church.
I would imagine that's where registration came from, is as a way to order and make sure you know how many envelopes that you're sending out and how to, really make some heads or tails of your finances, which is
Absolutely.
Pragmatic and practical.
It's very practical. But the question is, what is it practical about?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, so we're tracking everybody, and it's like, oh, well, they're not registered. It's like, well, okay, well, what does that mean? Does that disqualify you from things? And it's like,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, well, you're running a school and you want to ensure that somebody's contributing. It's like, okay, so that could disqualify you. But really the aim of parishes being constituted by space, it's like a tactical, here's what you're supposed to aim at. So it's this idea of the whole world is cut up into, it's pretty interesting. The whole world is cut up into parishes so that the gospel can go to all the corners.
That's so important.
That's pretty strategic, man. That's pretty strategic.
Really,
And if we aimed at that, my brothers, like, man, would we actually get somewhere? But I have walked into so many parishes that have these norms that are written up in these like disciplines. You can't baptize your child unless you are here in this parish and you are registered for a year.
You're not registered, you're dead to me. You and your family are dead to me.
That's tragic. And people are turned away. I
You
would be
think
turned
St.
away.
Paul cared if someone was registered to the Church of
St.
Athens?
Francis Xavier, like St.
You think they
Francis
cared?
Xavier saying,
It really is kind of a bureaucratic mess, the whole concept of registrations. And it's such a great point that you brought up, fathers, is that the parish is not the people who are registered to go to mass. It is everyone within a geographical boundary, just like a city has or a state has boundaries. That's what a parish has. And in the old days, you would have your rogation days where the parish would walk around the whole bounds and kind of very clearly stake out, this is our area. And every living soul, man, woman, Christian, or otherwise, was the charge of that priest. And we've lost that. You know, how often do you see the priest going out into the community and being at the restaurant or at the bar or being really a member of, well, there's the, you know, it used to be, well, there's the mayor, the fire chief, the police chief, and the priest, and everyone knew it. Now, no, they've lost that communal sense. Ryan, what are you saying?
I think this is I appreciate this reality, right? Because I mean, you look at and we mentioned this earlier. The United States grew so fast, and we built, and like you mentioned, we might have overbuilt in some cases, but that was a time where people came to the church, and the church received them and had to have some sort of acknowledgement of their presence and where they lived, and a lot of these records of registrations, as you priests know, if you've been to a parish that's old, were on paper. And so I think the dynamic of our church has changed. Like we mentioned too, there's some cultural dynamics and liturgical and some other things we'll get into. But I think you look at this as, you know, I don't think they meant like you were registering for the parish. I think it became that as you fall back on your heels, that's sort of a means for you to stay there. And so we had this amazing, especially in the Northeast where a lot of these churches are closing, this dynamic has affected them even more. These people were coming to the church that, oh, you know, this is Johnny, you know, here we are. We just moved to the parish, you know, get our name down. We want to know what's going on in the parish. We want to be able to give to you. That's gone. Right. And I don't know why. We'll get into some of that later with you guys, but as it changed, I think the church is always in renewal. It's like, hey, what are we doing? Like, what? And that's the question we're asking right now is like, how does the church renew herself from this into the current situation that we're in? But I think a lot of that came from the dynamic of the boom of the United States and the growth that happened. I think Pope Benedict XVI spoke very well, and I believe it was the spirit of the liturgy where, or no, it was I think it was George. I'm going to sound stupid, but in a book I read once, the church was a building church. That's what it was. It was building, literally building itself. And I think the soul of that church suffered in certain circumstances to where we're now kind of faced with that. And that's just my comment on the dynamic and how it's changed.
No, and I think the point that you made, Delacroix, I think is just so valid. The church has had responsibility of documenting her sacramental registry, you know, and that is very important. When you go to the archives in St. Augustine, the oldest parish in the United States of America, you know, you get to see firsthand, and I've been so privileged to see these documents of native baptisms, of slave baptisms, and you could see the church alive and engaging the parishioners within those boundaries in a beautiful way. And you see that documentation. So I think principally speaking, the sacramental registry is very important to the church, but it is supplemental to the engagement levels where we see St. Paul's evangelization. We see St. Francis Xavier's evangelization. We see the greatest evangelization in the history of the world after the 1531 event in Our Lady of Guadalupe. And when you see that need, you know, that is what the church should be aiming at. The way that Father Josh expressed that the gospel should be proclaimed in every corner of the earth as a result of the Great Commission of Jesus, sending out the apostles to every nation, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them all that I have taught you. And behold, I am with you even until the end of the age. That Great Commission is just so important. And we could see it realized in the structures of how the church has canonically established these boundaries, but the engagement can sometimes be overwhelming. And I could say, just personally, being the only priest and pastor at a parish that's now 1,700 families, it's like I'm overwhelmed with just the needs of my parishioners, my registered parishioners. And I thank God for having a relationship with Sheriff Hardwick, who calls me out of my parish boundaries to participate in local community, county level efforts so that I do have engagement to a certain degree. But that's where I want to aim at, is getting out to the non-Catholic population and make sure that it's balanced.
Yeah, see, I mean, you caught yourself there. You said, I have enough work with my parishioners, you know?
Yes.
and there's all the people there, you know. And you touched
hard.
on it's incredibly hard, and you touched on it, and this goes into the next point is that, well, with the decline, I wouldn't even call it necessarily a decline, but with the growing imbalance between the amount of priests and the amount of people that need to be served, there's a decline or less vocations and more people. The divide between how many people a priest has to administer to is getting really large, and our priests are overwhelmed. They can't keep up with it all. I mean, they're expected to be, the modern priest is expected to be a spiritual leader, a financial leader, someone who is an HR manager, someone who's dealing with marriage prep, someone who's dealing with sacramental prep, someone who's dealing with drug addiction issues, someone who's dealing with marriage problems, someone who's able to deal in education for children. We are asking so much from our priests. How can you expect these men to be able to answer every call and to be all things to all people? I mean, I know St. Paul says become all things to all people, but I don't think he imagined that you were going to become an accountant and a school administrator and a marriage counselor. Like, I don't think that was what he was talking about. So priests are very overwhelmed. And a social worker. Priests are super overwhelmed.
And an architect.
And a construction manager.
And a fair manager and, planning menus for this and that. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, guys, I don't want to say anything that you probably don't know, but you guys are looking pretty tired right now. You guys are working hard.
I'm just going to take a cat nap.
You got everybody else getting a little gray in the.
Yeah, that's very true, man. There's a lot of grays.
You know how they show like when a president gets inaugurated and they show him 8 years later and he looks like a catcher's mitt, right, compared to day one. Like I want to see Father Richie on his on the day he was consecrated, and then 8 years later, it's night and day, right?
Buddy,
you don't age like regular people.
That is so true. I've got to see if I could get this picture in front of your face right now, because this is my favorite picture of all time. Really emphasizing what you're saying, and it's a meme, and I hope this is going to come up, but it is. Oh, it's an image of Leonardo DiCaprio in the Titanic looking all young, the first year of priesthood. And then the second one is the second year of priesthood. And it's
from The Revenant.
Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant. And that's definitely the experience, firsthand.
So how are you guys dealing with it?
I want to throw in, by way of introduction to the topic on being overwhelmed, that yes, priests are overwhelmed in some ways, but it's not this. We ought not, Father Rich, I'm sure you don't do this. We ought not think that we are overwhelmed in the way that parents are. Mm-hmm. Dad. Yeah. See, exactly. So just we'll hold that in context here, because the married life is and honestly, you hear people talk about priests are like, man, he's 80, but he doesn't look that old, or the religious sisters is like, man, they age well. It's like, we don't have the same types of concerns and stresses. So yeah,
but those 80-year-old priests were, they aged when they had like 2 parochial vicars and a nice war chest. Yeah, you guys are not going to age the same, right? You guys are dealing with different circumstances.
Yeah. But I would agree with Father Josh. There's definitely distinctions to be made and drawn between the busyness of family life and the busyness of parish life. And you could have different priests in different types of environments that are being called upon for very many different reasons. I think if I did not have the capacity and I felt that God was not preparing me for this capacity and to respond to the needs of the parish, I would be the first one to tell the bishop, like, Bishop, I don't think that I'm a good fit for this. And maybe another type of pastoral initiative in the hospitals or in the prison or, whatever it may be. So I'm locked in, I'm engaged. I am as happy as can be. I love my priesthood, and I definitely see the way that expectations can lock me down in different respects, where I want to be more free to be able to minister in different ways. Like I want to be able to provide more Bible studies. I want to be able to provide more digital content for the parish and for the congregation that's gathering digitally. Right now, we're doing the 44-day consecration to St. Joseph that concludes on St. Joseph the Worker. And, every day, which I have to do today, jump on live YouTube feed, and we engage the community that way. So I want to do more things like that, but I do find myself in meetings that I don't necessarily have to be in if it's properly structured. And I think when it comes to, being overwhelmed with particular initiatives that don't necessarily have to include me, that's certainly an area that I could see as a detractor from, one, the aim, what we're talking about, but two, how we can feel overwhelmed at times because we are being pulled in many different directions. But I only want to be pulled in one singular direction, and that's to fulfill my office of the pastorate, of the priesthood, as is indicated in canon law, and what I have to, do in sacramentally caring for my parishioners. So yeah, I think when it comes to this kind of second point, because I'm presuming that this is the second reason why there's failure, failed dynamics in the church, is because of a lack of engagement in many different respects.
Yeah, that's right, Father Rich. And I think what you can look at is that priests are being asked to do things that really was never intended necessarily the priesthood. In 1950, an average person could run a business and send out clocks all around the world, and then they would put the serial number, write it down in a ledger, and they'd keep track of the inventory. But with the speed of the modern world and just international shipping, next day delivery, everything's digitized, buy it online, this and that. The same kind of modern stress is being applied to the priesthood. Brick and mortar buildings are closing all the time. How many closed Best Buys or Kmart's do you see? Because people don't respond the same way anymore. It's not the same relationship that people have. And priests are being asked to do things they weren't properly trained to do. And also, the manpower isn't there. I mean, the church needs to make an investment in having specialists within these parishes to handle the calls of the modern world, whether it's through digital communications, whether it's through these types of outreach things that just cannot be done by one person, having good AV and audio, having someone to be able to produce that stuff, a social media manager. These are the things that are necessary, but we're still kind of running 1950 software in our parishes when we need to be in the 2020s. We are running obsolete guiding and operating principles in parishes that just don't work anymore in light of the demands and the technology of the world.
Yeah. One of the kind of lenses that I look at the issue through is just, I told you I'm a nerd, so it's just kind of like a nerdy sort of, but I look at it through the lens of information or data. So it's like, take a person, there's lots going on with a person. They've got their anniversaries that they celebrate throughout the year. They've got maybe a concern with, a spouse that's dying. And as you start to stack up the information, I mean, like each person, is complex. So it's like, well, we're trying to be pastors, we're trying to be priests, we're trying to help the parish organization to really be tuned in to those details. And then you start looking at the aggregation. So you start looking at the aggregation of all those details across, like Father Rich, you said, with your hundreds upon hundreds of families and parishioners. It's like, well, what are you going to do? Well, most of what we do is we just dump it. It's like, man, that's too much. I got to dump it. And that makes sense. I mean, that's a survival tactic. It's like, there's no way you can keep track of everybody's birthday. For instance, there's no way you're going to remember that. Now, I have some friends who are really smart, and they can keep track of a lot of stuff in their brain, not everything, but a lot of stuff in their brain. And I think, man, I could never do that. And so
it's like my friend Ryan Shield. That's exactly what I think all the time. It's like, how do you keep all that information in your brain all the time? It's totally same experience.
It's just having a giant Slovenian head, man. It's just it's just a square footage. It's a square footage game. That's right.
I love it. So, so it's at some point we have to start to ask ourselves the questions like, well, what are we going to do about that? I heard once of a hotel, you may have heard of it, that's like, when a guest comes in and the first thing that they do is ask for, a Dr. Pepper. It's like they write that down. And then the next time that you show up, they have a Dr. Pepper for you on your bed. It's like, man, that's hospitality, the awareness, the tracking, the care for the interests and the preferences and what's going on for that person. It's like,
the use of the information, the purpose of the information. Yeah,
exactly. And so, with information's proliferation, now it's like, what are you going to do with all that? So mostly I just think we just dump it.
But the thing is that a lot of that data in the past used to be very valuable, as the way that a person was really ingrained and ingratiated into the parish. Like, Mr. Williams, I've seen your parents at church. Where is, Jimmy and Johnny? I know you're here, but where's your brothers? Nowadays, I mean, look, with 1,700 or 2,000 families, you can't keep track of every person's name, even if you do a heroic job. And I've seen Father Rich at his parish. I mean, he knows as many people on a day-to-day basis as I've probably known in my entire life, and he remembers it, but it's a Herculean task. I mean, it's the Aegean stables. I mean, there's no way that he's going to be able to do it by himself. So, having some technological advancements and having some real consideration of how a parish operates in the 21st century and addressing it and not pretending we're in 1950 anymore. Look, take the liturgy back to the 1950s, not the technology. There's, some things work, some things don't. And unless we do that pretty soon, like I said, you're not going to be able to keep up. You're going to be Kmart in a world of Amazons, and it's going to get washed away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's such an important point. And, but I've got to share, like Bishop Estevez, when he asked me to continue studies in media and communications, and he sent me for an executive production degree at St. John Paul the Great. I heard from brother priests, like older guys, they criticized the bishop for doing that. And it was like, this is a revolutionary act by Bishop Estevez to send me for this type of studies.
This shows the result of that. I mean, those other priests could have been right.
Yes.
Turn your microphone on.
But when you look at that, it's like, no, but look at what Archbishop Sheen did. Look at we need to invest in this platform. And how many times do we share? Like, look, criticize what we do something better. We need to have more people in the space. We need more investment on a structural level and how guys are being formed, because this is a need, and we don't want to be a Kmart in an Amazon world. We need to bring the church into the digital space in that respective digital continent that's been identified. And we need to really put in a lot of pastoral energy at the bishop's level and then even at the local level.
No, we've talked about this on a lot of episodes. Having digital dioceses, it really kind of makes sense in the modern world. Like, there needs to be a pastoral plan that divides it up, just like they used to in the days of Rand McNally Naps or in the days where there was dirt roads. There needs to be a plan for the reality of the situation on the ground. And Father Rich, I mean, you've talked about that, having digital dioceses. And that kind of moves into our next point, is the relationship between parishes and dioceses. That a lot of it really is based on, Swiss canons or the structure of the Holy Roman Empire or city-state structures in the papal states. And it's not quite the reality of the way people live today. We don't live under Napoleonic law. There's different realities of how people move around and how information passes back and forth. the bond can never be broken between a priest and a bishop, because that is, that's something different. But I'm saying having there's the chancery downtown and the dean, and then, you send your money there and that. I mean, it's not exactly an optimal model for the 21st century. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Father Josh, please share your thoughts.
Your bishop listening.
Your bishop's listening.
Might be.
Hi, Bishop.
Shout out to Bishop Medley. Amen. I'm in my fifth assignment, going into my sixth on June 8th this year. So I'll be moving 2 hours away. In my third assignment, I was doing marriage preparation with a young lady who lived in Owensboro, Kentucky, which is the location of the parish that I lived in. And her husband-to-be was working for Harman as an engineer in Japan. And so that was my first FaceTime marriage preparation. And it was a little bit comedic, I've got to tell you, because we were on FaceTime together. So I was sitting here, and then the bride was sitting right beside me, and then the groom was 3,000 miles away. It didn't look quite right. Like they did to one another, but instead it was really weird. But nonetheless, we moved through a time of preparation. But I think the reality is that I think especially in couples, Father Rich, hopefully you can comment on this, but I think especially with marriage preparation as concerns some of the day-to-day operations of the sacramental life of the church, it's like the young people are displaying the increasing complexity because people are between dioceses, and people are in transition, and people are graduating and going to graduate school, and he's here and she's there, and they're in different dioceses, and they're getting ready to move. And it's just this kind of like constantly rotating dynamic, and they're sometimes loosely connected with different parishes. Sometimes there's the home parish that they want to go back to, and the reality is that it's a very delicate time for people, I think, and we are really teetering on missing a huge opportunity by, instead of bailing out on the complexity, by really embracing it and being able to take care of it well and send them, into the sacrament, regardless of whether they fit the traditional models of preparation or not.
Look, I was reading something. I think there's somewhere around 175,000 Catholic marriages performed in the United States in the last year without coronavirus, right? About 175,000 Catholic marriages. There's a lot more marriages than that. And go and try to get married at a Catholic parish. The number one reason people are not getting married in a Catholic church, probably not necessarily about their canonical status, but it's like, well, I got to go through like 7 months of classes. I got to go do this and that. I got to jump through hoops. Look, man, I just want to get married to this girl, right? And you guys are giving me the full Inquisition, like your Torquemada, man. I just want someone to say, you're married, kiss the bride. Now, there's something to be said for proper formation and having the banns of marriage published and making sure that someone, is canonically able to get married. Shouldn't take 8 months, shouldn't take 9 months. It shouldn't take 36 meetings. I mean, it's almost an unrealistic expectation of a couple when they're trying. I'm sorry, this world tells them, well, you got to plan the wedding and this band and what kind of meat are you going to have and what's the dress. And they're like, I don't got time to talk to Father Pagano, as charming as he is. I don't want to talk to him 6 times in the next 2 months. I don't want to do it. We're missing a huge opportunity there.
Yeah, the other thing too is with people coming into the church, man. I've sponsored like 4 or 5 couples, and thanks be to God, Father Pagano was with me when this guy that we brought on a trip had a conversion, and he's like, I want to become Catholic. And so we went back to his house, yada, yada, yada. They joined. Well, he's traveling all the time, much like your friend in Japan. She's really serious about her faith. He's kind of, needs to be more serious. And so there was a need for formation. Don't get me wrong, please. And the challenge was that it was being met with, well, you got to come to RCIA classes. And he's like, well, all right, so I'm going to have to make, so this is going to take me out 6 years to get into the church based on how this is all going to work. So they went to the pastor, and the pastor accommodated them as much as he could. He's a parish of one of the largest parishes in the country. Okay. And so he was very gracious with his time, very accepting and all that. But they got so frustrated that they went to go see him one day, and she literally cried and said, we just want to become Catholic. Have we not done enough? Have we not shown you that we're reading these books, that we're learning this stuff, that we understand the major tenets? Literally crying. And you know what he says? All right, we'll put you next week or whatever, I mean, like, should it be, and believe me, God is bigger than our absurdities and our corporate blunders. Trust me, we all know that. We've all experienced that. But the reality is it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't.
Could you imagine Peter going up and staying with the family of Cornelius, and then he has the vision, and the whole family wants to convert and be baptized, and Peter's like, about 5-6 months. We got to go through some classes first. No, Peter baptized them on the spot, said, boom, Catholic, see you in heaven, right?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to structures of evangelization and being able to utilize platforms that would assist in engagement, and having lay effort in respect to counselors and other people that would be volunteering the effort to ensure that there is a proper engagement level. Right now, for example, 6 months to 8 months of formation or preparation for marriage in comparison to, the 9 years that it takes in preparation to become a priest. There does need to be some type of preparation, but when it's like sporadic, when it's poor, when it's like, I feel like this is jumping through hoops, I really don't have engagement, even like the annulment process at times, is it aimed at healing? Because that's what it's intended to do. It's aimed at like healing, your heart and getting to know where the wounds are. But can we actually meet that need? And so when it comes to, how important getting the sacramental registry is, I need to know that you're baptized. I need to know that you're confirmed. I need to know that you received First Holy Communion, that you're prepared for the sacrament of marriage. Do I need dispensations? Do we need all of these types of things? Well, now, I mean, we have to get in contact with the church in the Philippines, because you're from the Philippines, you were baptized there, then you had First Holy Communion in California, then you were in the military, you bounced around, and it's why the church really hard.
The church needs to get all those records on like a blockchain technology, so they're accessed.
We can encrypt it and make it secure. I agree.
Right, and then it's verified. Like, hey, Father so and so in Boise
easy. That would be so
that
easy.
over in in the Philippines, and it's there. I mean, the technology exists now. But you talked about having a structure of these formation. I think this is a great point to bring up, Father Josh, the work that you've done in automating that and using what you said, your nerdish nature, which I'm disputing. I just think you're, technologically savvy, but you've developed a I mean, I'll call you nerd if you want. I don't want to, but
no, you don't have to.
Okay. But you've developed software. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because this talks exactly about, baptismal prep and first communion prep and marriage prep, which is a huge problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I was at my third assignment, I was working with 12 couples in marriage preparation. Father Rich, how many couples how many are you working with?
Probably in the low 20, like probably 21, 22 couples right now.
That's a lot. So so I was kind of apprising the situation, just kind of looking at it, like stepping back and like, man, it's like there's a lot of details here to keep track of. And there's things like, do I have their baptismal certificate? Do I have the phone number for the florist? Right. So like very varying levels of importance for the marriage prayer, for the marriage itself, for the sacrament. And so I was thinking to myself, I thought, gosh, there's so many details. And like, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if I know the name of the flower girl, but if I didn't get the dispensation for disparity of worship, it's like, that's a bad detail to miss, because that detail involves going back to the couple and saying, you remember that pretty gathering that we had 2 days ago? It's like, yeah, that didn't quite go off.
Yeah, you're gonna have to tell mom and dad you're gonna have to drop another 40K. Sorry. Sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I mean Mr. Smith and Mrs. Williams.
So this, my kind of neurotic personality was looking like this, like, all right, like, let's look at my system for just a second to see, am I really on top of these details, especially the important details, for these 12 couples? Because it's like, hey, this is an incredibly meaningful to the couple, meaningful and important day in their life and connection to the church. It's like, this could be a make it or break it moment. It's like, oh, do we really have those moments? Yes, we do, lest we forget. It's like, okay, we've got to capitalize on those moments, right? It's not that they don't exist. We have to capitalize on the ones that are there. So it's like, okay, so what's my system? It's like, well, I've got checklists, and I have
sheets of paper everywhere, Post-its, things flying out the window of your car, like
and in manila envelopes
written on your hand, phone number.
Yeah, so I was like, well, maybe in the year 2017, like maybe this isn't the best system. And I'll tell you a little bit about what I've built. But we've discovered in working with parishes around the country that there are basically two strategies for helping people be ready to be married. And the first strategy is checklists, and the second strategy is spreadsheets. And that's top of the line, man. Checklists and spreadsheets. It's like, that's not a horrible way to deal with it. I mean, it's Father Rich, it's better than a Post-it note, but better than
a Post-it note. And you could probably have printed that out like 100 years ago.
Yeah. So it's real. So it's like, well, is that the best that we can do? So it got me on a little kick, and I was trying to figure out, like, all right, well, there's all this stuff out there. Salesforce is out there, man. There's all these CRMs and CMS and all these databases all over the place. I'm like, all right, it's time to break down. I'm going to have to go and find the one for sacramental preparation. And so, I was looking around.
How'd that go for you?
There's nothing out there. This is zero. This is zero.
And there's parish database systems like PDS or ParishSoft or things like that, but that doesn't add the components of parish engagement and sacramental prep. And where are these vulnerable opportunities that we can meet somebody in marriage? Somebody is in need of a visitation to the sick, or somebody's dying, and we're coursing this confirmation class through. Do we have all of their needs? It's all over the place, and you really can't use a lot of these softwares that are tried and true within a diocesan structure. So you need something that's pastorally driven And I think that's what the inspiration for Father Josh and his team and engagement around the country. This is a need everywhere, and certainly a need of mine. And that's how Father Josh and I got connected initially with the software. So what was the software that you built?
Well, when I first built the first iteration of Pastoral Parish, I built it as a plugin for WordPress. So I was like, I've got to break down and figure this out. So I started, working because, when I was in middle school, I learned BASIC, which is a computer programming language. That was in my spare time. And then in high school, I took a college course on C++. And so I was like, all right, so I can figure this out. So I, got some books and started reading and stuff. And I started to build the plugin in WordPress and was like, I can't do it. Total failure. I was trying to get like one thing to show up on the screen. Nothing. Zero. It was a total failure. So I just gave up for that time. And then later is coming back with these marriage preps. And so I eventually got into a program called FileMaker. And I started building this, which is kind of like Microsoft Access. And so the thing to me that was so urgent for the church is that people need pathways to know like what's the next step. Priests, parish staff, and parishioners. Like, what's the next step? If you know the next step, there's research about people clicking on things. It's like, if you know what the button is, you will click because at least you know that you're making progress. But what happens is people go to a parish and they're like, yeah, you want to get married? Okay, it's like you're going to need, here's the parish policy, and here's the diocesan policy, and here are the canonical requirements, and then, oh yeah, you're going to have to get insurance through the diocese.
Like your tongue. Like your tongue.
Well, how do I make sense out of that? I go to church once a month and you're giving me 15 pamphlets. It's like, can somebody not straighten it out? So it's like, okay, here's your next step. And so I really took it up to be like, what's the next step? You have to do these 40 things, let's say, to be ready for marriage prep, putting information in, going on a retreat, doing these things that are on our checklists and are on our Post-it notes, but it's a discrete process. And
now
so,
I've got to tell you personally, using Pastoral Parish, your software, it does exactly that. It cuts right to the chase, and it's like, it's ease of use. My receptionist, my coordinator, the people that are receiving requests, they could throw them into this need. And now I could see it. I could see where the progress is. I know where my family life coordinator is now in respect to his confirmation prep. And the way that you've designed this thing, is just very attractive. And, what would be your elevator pitch for, this software that you built?
It's like, hey, I'm a nerd, I'm a priest, and I want to help priests be the best. Give you some more time, help you engage people, and help you accompany them through the sacraments.
I was just thinking how beautiful it would be to attract vocations with an ease of use app, right? Because, what do people think about when they're priests? What we should be thinking about is this active ministry in a parish, right? This active ministry, being with people when they pass away, being with children and families in struggle, being, this is what a young man who's faithful, who's considering a vocation would love to see, not the papers flying out of the car. And so it's just like,
here's a brochure.
Yeah, it's like, get a brochure. Wow, I want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody's selling anything anywhere where that's the thing. So again, it's God's church, it's not mine, but we all know that you get a platform like this, you free a priest up for ministry, then you're really priesting.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's what you're doing. You're not managing a bunch of manila envelopes, you're priesting. And that's what I think young men are going to want as the digital age becomes more and more prevalent, which I can't imagine it becoming more prevalent, but it probably will be. But at the end of the day, how do we attract vocations, right? It's through technology,
And Delacrosse, that's, when we worked together, when I did the internship after my degree, to conclude my degree, that was one of the, the business plans that we created was a discernment.life platform. And, that is something that we need to dust off and continue working on, because it is such a need in the church. But we need to bring up to speed in every respect our parishes so that they are not failing. Back to like the content of this show, that they're not failing in dynamics, that they're not closing their doors, and that the doors are open wide to all people, Catholic, non-Catholic. I get so many people just to participate in my church because of the Catholic Talk Show, because of access to Catholic content, and it's a way of introduction. Other people that just come onto my feed at Nocatee Catholic or at Father Pagano on YouTube, on social media, just seeing the type of church that we are and the messages that are coming across. They're introduced to it. So the digital space is a wonderful calling card. It's a vocational card to be able to draw people where they dynamically are. Where are these demographics? They're all online. When you look at the way that police departments and the FBI and all of these different initiatives of governing and enforcing law, they're going right to social media and getting materials to see what people are doing. We need to be aggregating that same data on a universal level so that we can watch these, see what's happening among human trends, and being able to set up structures just like Father Josh's in Pastoral Parish, and reaching all these other types of dynamics. That's why the digital continent and digital dioceses and pastoral initiatives have to be under the authority of the bishop and really exercised by priests just like Father Josh, who is self-coined as a nerd. What a gift that you have to be able to build such a platform to move the church in this direction. It's a shame that it wasn't done yet, but thank God that you've done it.
And the other thing too, going back to what we were talking about, how the church built, this is what the churches should be building now. And he's begun this process. And fortunately with the digital space, and this is something that I talk about all the time, is that once you build something like that, you can go from 0 to 100 with technology. So you can solve all the problems right now with technology. You don't have to build 1,000 churches and keep developing this and that. You build a platform like he's got that takes care of everything in a parish, brings it all in as an infrastructure. It's like building one parish that can serve many, right? Back in our old, analogies. So
if you're sitting out there and you've got a parish that needs support digitally, your pastor might need this type of support. Get this in their hands. Share Pastoral Parish. Sheil's going to be able to put the links up on the feed, and check out Pastoral Parish. Share it with your pastor. Share it with your pastor's staff, because it may be a big help to them. And just personal experience, my staff love using Pastoral Parish. The ease of use, the attractiveness of the program itself. It's enjoyable to see progress being made visually. It's satisfying to see progress being made in all of the sacramental prep and the pastoral care for people that are most vulnerable and in need of follow-up. It's all right there in a package that you definitely want to check out. So check out Pastoral Parish. So Father Josh, how's a way that people can get to know Pastoral? What's the web domain? How can people find out more information about Pastoral Parish?
Yeah, so we've got our main website is just pastoralparish.com, and I'm just grateful to my team. I mean, I'm really focused on being a priest, and the team is focused on running the organization and getting this into the hands of parishes throughout the country. And so my team would love to talk to pastors or people that work in parishes or parishioners, to set up a demo and kind of do a run through and then get them going.
Yeah, Pastoral Parish will really help you. If you're a priest out there, it'll really help you make heads or tails of managing your baptisms, your marriages. It's really going to be an invaluable tool. Go to Pastoral Parish to check it out. Or if if you're listening to this, tell your priest about it. Tell them, say, look, I'm sure you're overwhelmed. Check out Pastoral Parish, get a demo, call them up. It's, designed by priests for priests, understanding the real practicality of running a parish and ministering to people in a digital age. Now, but before we do go, Father Rich, we also have 2 other groups that we need to mention. Why don't you tell everyone about them?
Absolutely. My pleasure. First and foremost, we would not be able to have this show without our patrons and our sponsors. So a big shout out to our patrons who financially support our show. Thank you so much. If you're considering being a financial supporter of the show, go to patreon.com/Catholic Talk Show. And there you'll see every way that you could support us and our sponsors. Hallow is one of our sponsors, our longtime sponsor. They are so supportive. We've had a show with their founder and their creator, another great way to engage people in the digital space and draw them into the mystical prayer and the history of prayer in the universal church. We have such a rich history, but to have an application like Hallow that guides you through all of these different various prayer forms, Lectio Divina, to really dive deep in the Bible with a year with Father Mike Schmitz, and to see how many different people have been drawn into this #1 app in the App Store. Hallow is the #1 Catholic app. There are many reasons why, and I know Ryan Delacroix uses it every day.
Yep. I use it with my kids too, with my wife. It's just a really easy way to pray if you're struggling. Like myself, I struggle to pray with a lot of kids and a lot of distraction. Guided meditation is probably one of the best ways to pray when you're struggling with prayer, because somebody is guiding you into the depths of your heart. And in the depths of your heart, you find Christ himself there dwelling within you.
Now, if you're sitting there jealous of the man that is Ryan Shield because of his beard and his very woodsman-like look, this next sponsor is quite impressive, and it's one of our newer sponsors. Shield, share a little bit about our other sponsor.
Sure. So, look, any man.
Can you speak with a little bit of a deeper voice, though?
Back in the summer of 71, I was in the Great North Woods, and I saw fell in among the timbers a beautiful oak.
Yes.
Glistening in the sunlight, I saw inside that oak that if with the right craftsmanship, a little bit of tooling, and some gumption, I could make something spectacular out of it. And that's what the Catholic Woodworker does. So the Catholic Woodworker creates very fine art, artisan level and heirloom level rosaries, crucifixes, and home altars, right? They're taking these sacramentals that so often are just kind of poorly constructed. You buy them $2, they're made so overseas, they're really not the proper dignity that a crucifix should have. They're not the proper dignity that a rosary should have. They're made as a commodity. Well, the Catholic Woodworker, and you can go check them out on CatholicWoodworker.com, they create all their stuff by hand out of premium materials. So hardwoods and premium like metals like brass. You can go on the site and make your own combinations of metal and wood, but heirloom, beautiful quality rosaries, crucifixes, and home altars. If you don't have an altar in your home where you and your family can focus your worship inside the home when you're not at the church, you got to get one. A home altar really is a great thing to have in your home, and they're one of the very best makers of home altars. So go to CatholicWoodworker.com, check it out. And I mean, you can't get a better thing made. So if you're going to, buy a rosary from a store that comes in a plastic bag and it's $2, spend a little bit more money. It's not a lot more, but it gives it the proper dignity and something it's worth the investment. So CatholicWoodworker.com.
All right. Well, we appreciate you guys listening to our show, and we will see you next week. Thank you, Father Josh, for joining us today.
Thanks. It's my pleasure. God bless y'all.
God bless you too.